We are going to begin on Shabbos Daf Samach Ches Amud Beis 68b, and we saw in the Mishnah at the beginning of the parak. So the Mishnah had said that anybody that does a transgression of Shabbos unintentionally, meaning they didn't know, they were unaware of some aspect of Shabbos, then they bring a sin offering, a chatas offering, and the Mishnah made a three-level distinction. If somebody just didn't know the concept of Shabbos at all, then they bring one sin offering for all of the transgressions, all of the prohibitions that they transgressed, and all of the Shabbos combined, one carbon. If they knew the concept of prohibition of Shabbos, and that the Torah prohibits particular laws, but they forgot or was unbeknownst to them that particular Shabbos, so then they bring one prohibition for that particular one offering per Shabbos that they missed. And the third case is where they knew of the concept of Shabbos, and they knew that this particular week was Shabbos, day was Shabbos, but they forgot particular transgressions, particular prohibitions within Shabbos. So the Gemara had a discussion as to, did this person ever know of Shabbos, or did the person never know of Shabbos? And a statement of Rav and Shmuel of whether or not someone who never knew of Shabbos is also going to be considered a transgression. What do we say? Someone who never knew of Shabbos. So that was called Tinuk Shenishba Ben Akum. Someone who was raised amongst non-Jews, or a convert who converted amongst non-Jews. And it doesn't mean amongst non-Jews, as we saw, it has to be that he has a beis din, but that they never told him, he wasn't properly taught. So this person grew up or converted and wasn't taught properly the prohibitions of Shabbos and didn't know Shabbos. So is that person considered a ones, somebody who couldn't have known and therefore couldn't have avoided the transgression and does not need to bring a korban chatas? Or do we say no? That too is considered an unintentional sin and brings a chatas offering. So that's the question. The Gemara brought a machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Munabaz. And Munabaz offered that in order that there was a comparison to between an intentional act and unintentional act, because the Torah put them together, juxtaposed them, and therefore even an unintentional act, a shogeg, must be that it has intention. So Rabbi Akiva said, well, that means that even at the time that they did the sin, they must have known. And Munabaz said, indeed, that is the case. Munabaz was, by the way, king of Chadiab, which is I think it's called Adiabin in English, and it is the northern province, a northern province in Mesopotamia, and he was a king. There was Munabaz the first and Munabaz the second. It is unclear whether Munabaz the first, who was the father of Munabaz the second, also converted to Judaism, but his wife, the queen, Hilni Hamalka, Helena, she converted with her two sons, who were the next two kings. And Munabaz donated enormous funds to Jewish causes, including to donating to put gold onto the handles of vessels in the Beis HaMikdash and to fight the Romans. In any case, so Munabaz, the king of Chadiab, was also one of the scholars, a student of Rabbi Akiva. And so he says, Rabbi Akiva, my teacher, indeed, even if somebody doesn't know if somebody knows of Shabbos, it could still be considered a shogeg. And so the Gemara says, where does Munabaz know his teaching? My Tainama de Munabaz. So we are on 68b, about 6-7 lines from the bottom. My time of the Munabas. What is the basis in the Torah for Munabas? The chsiv for it says in the Torah, Torah achas lachem la'oseh b'shgaga. There should be one teaching, one Torah for anybody that does something inadvertently. And near that it says, anybody does something wantonly with a strong arm, a raised arm, so defiantly. And that compares the shogeg to the mazid. Somebody does something inadvertently to someone who does something intentionally. Just as somebody did something intentionally, he must have known. Obviously, that's intentional. So too, the shogeg must be that he did so intentionally, meaning he knew that this was a prohibition. But if somebody didn't know it was a prohibition, he doesn't have to bring a sin offering. According to Munabaz, that's not even a shogeg. How could he know? If he was ignorant to the law, that's an ones, and he doesn't have to bring a sin offering. V'Rabbanan, so the Gemara says, okay, that's a good. It's a good point. Munabaz has is it making a comparison between shogeg and mazid by the juxtaposition. The Torah says it's one teaching la'oseh b'shgaga and nefesh tasa b'yad rama. One who did so unintentionally, and one law for one who did so unintentionally, and then right there it says, and to the soul who does so defiantly. So Hay Torah achas my avdili. What did the Chachamim do with this teaching? Like Rabbi Shubba Levi taught his son. Torah achas yelachem lo b'shgaga. It says one teaching, one Torah there is to you for anybody who does something unintentional. Where there it says that you have to bring a korban, you bring an offering, a sin offering for having done this unintentionally. Now we turn to Samach Tesamad Aleph 69a. And it says, and you will be mistaken, you will err, and not do all of the mitzvahs. So what's all of the mitzvahs? That's one transgression that is equal to all the mitzvahs. That's idolatry. If you take on another god or you serve another god, you've transgressed all the Torahs and all the mitzvahs in the Torah, because you've said that Hashem is not God, and negated all the Torah. So which mitzvah, which transgression negates all the mitzvahs? That's idolatry. It says, and yet it says that it's one teaching, and the one who does so intentionally, does so defiantly. So so all of the inadvertent sins and intentional sins are compared to idolatry. That the definition of obligation of a chatas offering comes if the intentional act, the Torah gives the punishment of kares. The Torah says for various sins in the Torah that if somebody transgresses, that soul is cut off from its source, it's cut off from the nation. That soul excision, that the soul cutting off, is a severe punishment, and that punishment, any act that defiantly, intentionally brings about kares, that's when the Torah says that you bring a sin offering for the unintentional act. And that's the teaching here. The comparison to Avodah Zarah, the comparison to idolatry, that just as idolatry, your soul is cut off, so too with any sin that the soul is cut off, that there's kares, that's where the application of the chatas offering comes, and that's what the Chachamim do with this verse. So too for anything else that has kares, that's where the chatas offering would apply. That means if somebody did something, transgressed, but there's a no prescription of chatas for the sin in the Torah. So therefore, there's going to be no chatas offering. There's going to be no kares. There's going to be no chatas offering, even though it's a transgression. Two cases exceptions that even though they are punishable by kares in the Torah, nevertheless there's no chatas offering for transgressing, and that is the two positive commandments that have a prescription of kares, the punishment of kares, and that is bris milah, somebody who does not circumcise themselves. So if they weren't circumcised as a baby and don't choose to circumcise themselves, that is kares, but there's no chatas offering for doing that unintentionally, and as well as Pesach. And those are the two things that have kares for a positive command. In any case, so Munabaz said this: the source of that a chatas only comes for an act that has some aspect of intentionality. The person knew of the prohibition. The Chachamim use that verse of Torah Achas, one teaching for all of the things done unintentionally, to learn this concept that it has to be zedona kares. Intentional act is punishable by kares. That's when the unintentional act, the shigigasa, is chatas, that brings a chatas offering. And Munabaz has a different source for that. As Tues points out, Munabaz is going to have a source that the Gemara says in Yevamos. Rebbe says that we learn over there aleha, a textual comparison of aleha in regards to Yevamos. That's a whole concept in Yevamos, a disagreement on what to do with the extra word aleha in marrying a brother's wife, to take a second wife, aleha, and Munabaz is going to learn that, like Rebbe over there, to teach us this concept of zedonai kares, that intentional act is going to be kares. The unintentional act brings a chatas. But ela Munabaz shagaga b'may. Now the Gemara challenges Munabaz and says, wait 1 second. If the Torah calls it an unintentional act, yet you're saying they knew of the sin at the time of the sin. So in what aspect of that sin is it unintentional? Shagaga b'may. So the Gemara says, perhaps they didn't know that the Torah obligates a carbon, and therefore there is a carbon. It's a very unique circular thing. The person knew that this is a sin, but didn't know that there's a carbon for not knowing that there's a carbon, and therefore they bring a carbon. Very interesting thought that Munabaz has, but it's unintentional because he didn't know that it is punishable by carbon for the unintentional part. V'Rabbanan shigas carbon l'shmo shigaga. The Rabbanan say no, not knowing that there's a carbon offering that has to be brought when you didn't know, that's not going to be sufficient to count it as an unintentional act.
But I mean, lots of other places. I mean, if he doesn't know what the specific like I said yesterday, if he doesn't know what the specific punishment is, then he doesn't get punished by that punishment. If he didn't know. He knew it was wrong, but he didn't know. Oh, I didn't realize that I get lashes.
That's only in Beis Din.
So what's the point here?
No, that's what you're saying is only a Beis Din. It means if somebody we know that in order for somebody to be punished by Beis Din, the court is only going to mete out a punishment if there were witnesses and there was a warning, and the warning has to state the punishment as well. It says, don't do this because if you do, you transgress A, punishable by B. That is, and the person says, look, I didn't know that was a punishment. That would be grounds for Beis Din not giving a punishment, but not for not for it being considered a shogeg, an unintentional act. What Munabaz is saying here, and we'll see in a moment to Rabbi Yochanan as well, is that that not knowing the severity, according to Rabbi Yochanan, the severity of the prohibition. I didn't know that this was included in one of the kares things. Oh, okay. So that's not knowing the severity of the punishment. That would count as a shogeg. Or what Munabaz is saying is that I didn't know one of the particular laws, such as that if I don't know the law, that I have to bring a chatas offering. So this person did the act intentionally. They simply didn't know that that shogeg brings a carbon. That unintentional act brings a carbon, and it doesn't mean unintentional. It means that if I don't know about carbon, then I have to bring a carbon, and he didn't know that, which is totally circular.
Well, walk me through it. A person does an avera, and Basin says you did an avera. He said, "Oh, I didn't realize." He said, "Yeah, you have to bring a carbon." What's the difference? I mean,
what's the difference between what?
I mean, it's Basin. Basin's going to tell him he has to bring a carbon.
No, it could be there are no witnesses. No, based in. I realize, oh my goodness, I just transgressed something. This is a personal thing. I want to atone. I want to fix my ways. Yeah, this is somebody who wants to better themselves and realizes they made a mistake and they shouldn't have been doing this, and they did it. So they bring a carbon. This has nothing to do with witnesses. It has nothing to do with based in. This is a personal tshuva that a person is doing.
Would it be the case that if I saw my neighbor doing something he shouldn't have done on Shabbos, I go to Beis Din and says, so-and-so did a transgression, Beis Din wouldn't do anything about it?
There was no witnesses. They may talk to him. I mean, that wouldn't be a court proceeding. That would be a leadership guidance. It's very different. The fact that leadership will guide someone is not going to be the same as punishment.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Rabbanan say there's no such thing. Shigas carbon lishmosh gaga. The fact that you didn't know about the carbon, that there's a sin offering for inadvertently transgressing, which according to the Munabaz really means for intentionally transgressing, but not knowing some of the details. That's not going to be a shagaga. So that's not going to be shagaga is the term for inadvertent action, right? Shogi. Rabbanan shagaga b'mai, and according to the Rabbanan, what level of unintentional act is required? Do you have to not know of the prohibition, or you can know of the prohibition but not know the severity of the prohibition? Rabbanan shagaga b'mai. So Rabbi Yochanan shagaga b'kares afal pisha hizid b'lav. Even if you knew that this is a prohibition, but you didn't know that the Torah includes this in kares, where your soul is cut off from its source on account of the prohibition, that in and of itself is it makes it inadvertent. You didn't realize the severity of the prohibition, and you thought it was a misdemeanor, and now you know it's a capital punishment. Like, wait, I didn't know, right? That's Rabbi Yochanan. Rish Lakish Adsha Yishgog Belav Vikaris. Rabbi Yochanan says no. It has to be that you didn't know that it was a prohibition in the negative commandment as well, and of course you didn't know that it was the severity of it. If you didn't know that it was prohibited at all. Amar Rava my time in Shimon Lakish. So what's the basis for Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, which says that you need to not know of the sin at all? Amar Krava, because the Torah says Ashalote Asena Va'ashe. That the Torah says not to do it, and he didn't know the shagaga v'chisishgu. It says that his mistake was asher lo te'asena. He didn't know that the Torah said not to do it. Achi yishgu b'lav v'kares the Shabbat. It has to be that he didn't know the prohibition as well as the severity, the punishment. Rabbi Yochanan Haikra the Rishim and Lakish Me'avid. Well, what is Rabbi Yochanan going to respond to this? That it says asher lo te'asena, that which you shall not do, meaning he didn't know that it was prohibited. He needs it for something else. there's a brisa that says like this. It says in the verse, the full verse actually says, Me'ama Aretz, from the people of the land, that do a sin that should not be done. What does Me'ama Aretz teach you of the people of the land? Prat l'muma. That means somebody who acts in accordance with the people of the land, not, as opposed to someone who is in defiance. Somebody who's a mumar. A mumar is somebody who says, yeah, the law doesn't apply to me, the Torah doesn't apply to me, I don't have to do this, or I choose not to do this. That's a mumar. And we've seen elsewhere, question of whether somebody is a mumar l'tiyavin, if they know the law and they say, you know what, it's too hard for me, or a mumar lahachis, it's an act of defiance to Hashem. Either way, the as we'll see shortly, the concept of the korban meaning bringing close, is an atonement through somebody doing teshuvah, returning, coming close to Hashem. The korban is not the appeasement, rather it is somebody's change of action. And if somebody's a mumar, somebody says, yeah, the law doesn't apply to me, well then there's no point in the korban, so they don't bring a korban. It's from in the name of Rav Shimon, it says from here, the lack of knowledge that I'm not supposed to do it is what brought the sin. Therefore, the returning is somebody who it says it became known to him his sin, and then he brings the korban, the chatas offering. So it has to be that they didn't know, and if they had known, they would come back. Or as it says, hashav mi yidiyasa. If when the person, it becomes known to the person that they sin, shav, they return. Maybe korban. So he brings a korban shegasa for his inadvertent action. Lo shav mi yidiyasa. But if the fact that it becomes known to him that he made this mistake, and he just shrugs it off and doesn't try to change his ways and become better, that person does not bring a korban. The korban is a vehicle for the person self-betterment and and improvement. If the person is not going to change their ways, there's no korban. Al Sheyosef for the inadvertent act. So that's what Rabbi Yochanan means, that he learns from this teaching Ashaloti Asena, that it has to be that they once they know they shouldn't do it, they change their minds, and that's when the bring it comes. Tanan, the Gemara goes on to the further in the chatas offerings and brings a brisa like this, the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, we'll get to this in a few days. The Mishnah says that the principal malachas, the av malachas, as we talked about yesterday, that there are principal and secondary prohibitions within the 39 categories of Shabbos. So the 39 categories are the principal categories of malacha. But the Mishnah says they are 40 minus 1. And we talked about that a week ago or so. So Vavinabo, the Gemara asks, Minyana Lamali, why did the Mishnah have to tell us a count? Just say, here are the prohibited acts or the principal acts. Why does it have to say 39? As we saw yesterday in our Mishnah, if somebody knows the concept of prohibitions of Shabbos and knows that today is Shabbos and simply forgot all the prohibitions of Shabbos, didn't know any of them, and so they did all 39. This guy's right. He did all the 39 prohibitions of Shabbos. He tilled the ground and planted a seed and harvested and winnowed and threshed, winnowed, the whole thing, right? From the beginning to the end, that every single one of the 39 malachas this one Shabbos. He was very busy. And but he forgot it was Shabbos. or he forgot that today, he knew it was Shabbos, he forgot that these are the prohibitions. He needs to bring a korban for each one of the 39 malachas, and that's why the Mishnah mentions the number 39, so that you know how many there are, because that's a possibility that someone would be obligated a korban for each one of the transgressions. What's the scenario for that? That means he must know today is Shabbos, because if his mistake is that he thinks it's Sunday or he thinks it's Friday, well, then he's not going to be obligated in a korban for each one, because it's a single lapse. It's a single mistake. Must be that he knows it's Shabbos and knows that there are prohibitions of Shabbos, and simply each one of the actions is an individual mistake. He didn't know that this was prohibited. He didn't know that this was prohibited. So Bishlom, Rabbi Yochanan, Omakagoyin, Sheshagag Bekares, Alpha Pisha Hazed Balab. Mishkachas Lakagoyin, the other level, HaShabbos. Balab. So what is it, in what aspect did he know Shabbos? If he didn't know anything was prohibited, so that in what aspect did he know it was Shabbos? According to Rabbi Yochanan, they say he knew that this was prohibited. He simply didn't know the severity of the prohibition. He thought that, okay, it's a prohibition. He didn't realize that if he transgresses this, that they're going to get the punishment of kares, that their soul is detached from its source. I mean, that's a severe thing. And so he didn't, not knowing the severity is in and of itself a level of shogeg. So therefore, this person knew of Shabbos and simply didn't know the severity, and so each one of the acts brings its own korban. Hello, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, but according to Rish Lakish, he doesn't even know the prohibition. The Yadal Shabbos b'may. In what aspect did he know Shabbos? He doesn't know the 39 malachas. So what did he know? Now, it could say that he transgressed in one category, in each of the categories, in one of the subcategories. He knew the concept that that sowing seeds is a prohibition of Shabbos. He simply didn't know that watering the plants is also a subcategory of planting, because that's the way you plant. You put the seed in, and it needs to be watered until it grows. The other Shabbos b'may. So, but the Gemara asks the question: what did he know? So the Gemara said the other betchumen. He knows Shabbos in some other aspects. He knows the prohibition of traveling outside of the city, of walking beyond the 2,000 amma, 12 outside of the city. Rabbi Kiva, and as Rabbi Kiva taught, that says that is a Torah prohibition. And Gemara says, okay, so we now have this machlokas between Munabaz and the Chachamim. Munabaz says that you, in order to be obligated in a korban, you must know of the sin and the transgression. You simply didn't know all the details of the laws. According to the Chachamim, no, it must be an unintentional act. You didn't actually know the transgression in this act. According to Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, there was a machlokas of how much didn't the person know. The person didn't know the prohibition at all, or the person knew the prohibition but didn't know the severity of the prohibition. So Mantana Laha de Tarabana. Whose opinion is this that we're about to read? Shogeg b'zeh b'zeh, zeh shogeg amar b'Torah. Hazed b'zeh b'zeh, umezed amar b'Torah. If somebody didn't know anything about it, that's what that's the inadvertent act. That's the shogeg. Somebody knew everything about it. That's the intentional act. Shogeg b'Shabbos v'hizid b'malachos, or shogeg b'malachos v'hizid b'Shabbos. However, if he knew the concept of Shabbos, that there's a prohibition of action on Shabbos, but he didn't know the particular act, the particular malacha, the work that this person was doing, that is prohibited, or vice versa. The person knew that this is a prohibited act on Shabbos and simply didn't realize today was Shabbos. They woke up and thought it was Sunday. Or I know that this is a prohibited act. I simply didn't know that there's a korban to be brought, a sin offering to be brought for the action. Or no, I didn't know whether or not there's a korban to be brought. Chayiv, nevertheless, for all of these things, you're going to have to bring a sin offering, because all these count as unintentional act. Kaman kamunabas. This must be the act of the opinion of Munabas, who says that you have to know, and there's just some aspect of the law that you didn't know. Amar Abaye, Hi man, Hakol Modim b'Shavuas Bitui. Hakol Modim meaning both Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Well, the Gemara was going to say Hakol Modim man. Everybody agrees. Abaye says everybody agrees. Modim b'Shavuas Bitui. That if somebody makes an oath, the Torah we saw this a little bit a few days ago. The Torah says if somebody makes an oath, they have to bring a sin offering. Somebody made an oath and transgressed. So they said, I swear not to eat this apple. Or I swear I didn't eat that apple, past or future. And they did. So then they bring a sin offering. Everybody agrees there. You have to not know the prohibition, meaning I didn't know that this was the apple I swore not to eat, or I didn't know I was swearing about that apple in the past. So what does it mean? What did Abaye mean when he says everybody agrees to this? Who's he referring to? Rabbi Yochanan. He's referring to Rabbi Yochanan. That Rabbi Yochanan, he's not talking about Munabas, because by Munabas, we saw that he has to know that the act has to be intentional. It's only some of the laws that are unintentional, but the act has to be intentional. So he's not talking about Munabas. What he is talking about is Rabbi Yochanan, that we saw before. Rabbi Yochanan says that in regards to a Kare's prohibition, if somebody says, I knew the sin, I just didn't know the severity, that is also an inadvertent act, and you bring a chatas offering for that. However, in regards to the oath, where there isn't the severity, so there you have to not know of the prohibited nature of the act or the oath. Pshita, Rabbi Yochanan, that's obvious, because Rabbi Yochanan says that the inadvertent aspect of this transgression is in the nature of in not knowing the severity. But over here, there is no kares, so that you can't say I didn't know the severity. That it actually isn't as severe. There is no kares. So anyone says no. I may have thought since the idea by a oath that there is a korban is unique, because usually you're only obligated in a korban, as we saw before, if there is for the intentional transgression, there is kares punishment. So then you bring a chatas offering for the unintentional act. But over here, there is it's not as severe. There's no kares punishment for the intentional act, and yet for the unintentional transgression, you bring a korban. Oh, so that's unique. So perhaps it applies even according to Rabbi Yochanan. He bring a korban if he was mistaken about the punishment that he needs to bring a korban, that would also be enough to count it as a transgression, unintentional, meaning he knew that it's prohibited. He simply didn't know that he's going to have to bring a korban, an offering, if he transgressed. Kamash Malan. That's why Abaye tells us no. Rabbi Yochanan agrees. Here it must be, in regards to the false oath, it must be that he didn't know that this was the transgression. We are now on Amid Base on 69b. So the Gemara asks a question. What is, and the Brisa says, what is considered the unintentional act of an oath utterance? L'sha'avar, in the retroactive. As we just said, in the future, it would be, I swear I'm not going to eat this apple, and then later he didn't realize that this was the prohibited food. But in the past, it already happened, and he's taking an oath about it. So in what aspect is it unintentional? If he says, I know that it's prohibited to take this oath, but I don't know whether or not I'm obligated in the korban. So for that, I'd be obligated. Hamani, whose opinion is this? Munabaz. This is the opinion of Munabaz, because he says that not knowing the punishment or not knowing one of the laws is sufficient to be considered unintentional. But according to the Chachamim, indeed, there is going to be no retroactive unintentional oath, only a future unintentional oath, because retroactively, you know what we're talking about, and you swore that you didn't eat it, that apple, so you're going to be obligated. So you're going to transgress, and therefore you can't bring a korban. Rashi says that the parentheses text is a mistake. We're going to go on to the next line. Amar Abaye. Abaye further said, at least our text says that it's Abaye. So Amar Abaye. Abaye says, "Hakol moedem beteruma." Everybody agrees in regards to teruma, which is the approximately 2% tithe, which would be the wrong word, but the separation, the tithe from produce to give to the kohen. That Hakol moedem beteruma. Everybody agrees that the Torah says if a non-Kohen eats teruma, then he must pay back 125%, which is a fifth in Gemara math, meaning a fifth of the end total. So 25% on the 100. So it pays 125%, principal plus the quarter. As punishment or as a fine, as it were, for having eaten inadvertently this teruma that belongs to the kohen. So everybody agrees that you have to not know it's prohibited, meaning you didn't know that this is teruma, or you didn't know that a non-kohen eating teruma is a prohibition. It must be unintentional in the act itself. So who's hakol modim? Everybody agrees, meaning whom? Rabbi Yochanan. It means Rabbi Yochanan. That even though Rabbi Yochanan said before that for an unintentional act it suffices to not know the severity of the punishment in regards to teruma on paying the 125% return, it has to be that you didn't know the prohibition at all. Shita. As we just said, Rabbi Yochanan only said it where there was kares, which is a severe punishment, and he didn't know the severity. But over here, if this person knew the severity, there is no kares. So the severity is that it's prohibited. No, there is a punishment. The Torah says that the heavenly court, meaning from heaven, Hashem will bring about that this person dies young. That even though that the soul is not cut off from its source, but it is nevertheless a punishment of misa, videi shamayim, death from the heavens. Not in the court. It's not a capital punishment, but it is severe nevertheless. And this person didn't know that severity. And that should also be enough to consider it an inadvertent act because they knew it was prohibited but didn't know the severity, and therefore they should not be obligated in the sin offering and the 125% repayment. Kamash Malan. That's what Abaye says. That no, here too, Rabbi Yochanan only said it in regards to the severity of kares, but not in the severity of some other aspect of the law. Rava Amar. Rava says misa b'makim kares. He says no, the death is indeed in place of kares. Omedas. And the 125% is in place of the korban. And if you and according to Munabaz, if this person didn't know any one of these aspects, they would be obligated in that would be considered an unintentional act. That means they knew that this was teruma, and they knew it's prohibited for him to eat this, and he may have even known that it's punishable by death from heaven. Nevertheless, it'll be considered an unintentional act because he didn't know that he has to pay the 125%, the 25% fine on top of it. Amar Rav Huna says, "Mahalich b'derech." This is somebody is traveling, or b'midbar, is in a desert or somewhere where he cannot know what day of the week it is. Simply is out of touch with society, with the world, and he simply doesn't know. He knows he left 6 days ago. He just doesn't remember what day of the week it was, or vice versa. He remembers he left on a Tuesday, just doesn't know how many days passed since then. He's lost count and he lost track, and he doesn't know when is Shabbos. So what does he do? Mona shisha yamim u'meshama yom echad. He counts 6 days, and then the seventh day is going to be Shabbos. From the day that he notices it, he counts 6 days. However, Chiya Barav says the other way around. No, he starts off immediately. The next day he's going to observe as Shabbos, and then he's going to have 6 work days. But what's the basis of the logic for this machlokes? The first opinion, Rav Huna, he says that you're going to follow creation, and in creation you have 6 days and then Shabbos. And so to here, he's going to have 6 work days and then Shabbos. And Chiya Barav says, no, we're going to follow the first human who was born on a Friday. So the first next day was Shabbos, and thereafter there was 6 work days. So we ask a contradiction to Chiya Barav and a proof text to Rav Huna. Somebody is traveling, he doesn't know when is Shabbos. So he guards 1 day for the 6 days. Now, according to Chiya Barav, what it should say is he keeps 1 day as Shabbos and then works 6 days, not 1 for the 6. 1 for the 6 indicates, like Rav Huna, wouldn't you say that the meaning of this text is that he guards 1 day, that he works 6 days and then he keeps 1 day? As Shabbos. No, maybe it's even like Chiya Barav, and the text could be read like him. The Gemara says no. It should not you keep 1 day for the 6. It should say you keep 1 day as Shabbos and then you count 6. And besides, we have a brisa that's more explicit. Tanya, we have a brisa that says somebody was traveling or was in the desert. It doesn't know when it's Shabbos. He counts 6 days and keeps the 1 day as Shabbos. To Yufta, and the Chiya Barav, to Yufta, indeed, these brises are contradictions to Chiya Barav, and Rav Huna is correct that you count 6 days, and on the 7th day it's Shabbos. The Chassam Sofer says that it's a difference in theory of what Shabbos is as well. Is Shabbos rest so you have strength for the next week, or is the work of Shabbos? Is the work of the week to culminate in connection with Hashem on Shabbos? Is Shabbos the highlight of the week, or the introduction to the week? And the halacha is that indeed Shabbos is that we work 6 days with all of everything we have. We work the fields and we work the land and we work our jobs with the intention and the direction that once it comes to Shabbos, we can connect to our spiritual self and to Hashem. Amar Rava. So Rava said, even though that it says that he can count 6 days and then keep Shabbos for the 7th, every single day, what it means that he can work is he can travel as much as he needs in order to get back to civilization. But as far as work, he's only going to work prohibited acts of Shabbos as much as he needs to survive for that day. Besides for on Shabbos itself, he can't even work the 7th day that he counts as Shabbos. He can't even work what he needs to survive. So Gemara says, what are you talking about? That day he's going to die? No, the other met was shtei parnosas. No, the day before, meaning on the 6th day of his count, before the 7th day, he's going to do double work for that day and for the next. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? But maybe the day that he counts as his 6th day is actually Shabbos. And if he's going to do double work, he's doing double work on the worldwide Shabbos on account of his Shabbos the next day. Every single day he does parnasaso, he does what he needs for that day. And even on the day of Shabbos, he can do work what he needs for the day because it's life-saving. Well, if he can travel to get back to civilization and he can do his work, so in what way is he recognize Shabbos? Because that day, what it says that the 7th day he's going to call Shabbos, he's going to make Kiddush, and he's going to make Havdalah, Kiddush to welcome Shabbos in, and Havdalah at the end of Shabbos. Amar Rava, and Rava or Rabba says, if he knows part of the day, if he knows part of the day that he left, meaning he knows, oh well, I know that I left mid-Tuesday or 6 days ago or 5 days ago, so that day for sure is not Shabbos. So then that day he can do work. Pshita, that seems obvious. You know today is for sure not Shabbos, and then you can work that day. The Shabbos says no. Maybe if you know that you didn't leave on Shabbos, so you also know that you didn't leave on a Friday because you wouldn't set out to a journey on Friday. So maybe you can also discount 2 days and work those as for sure. I know I'm traveling for 6 days, and I know for sure I didn't leave on Shabbos, and I know for sure I didn't leave on Friday. So you have 2 days that for sure you can work completely, not only this enough to survive. So you know that for sure the earliest, the latest in the week you would have left was a Thursday. Literally, is 2 days you can work completely. Kamash Malan, he says no. Zimin in the Mishkachas because sometimes you're going to have a caravan leaving on Friday, and travel needs to be done in a caravan, and so you join the caravan on a Friday, and you got lost somewhere along the way. That's why you don't know what day it is. But maybe you left you actually did leave on Friday in Mikri V'Nafik, and therefore only Shabbos itself you say, look, I would not have set out on Shabbos, and I know I've been traveling for 6 days. I don't remember if I left on Thursday or Friday, and that's why you would do a malacha 1 day of the week. You're allowed to completely work. Thank you. Tomorrow we'll continue with the concepts of not knowing Shabbos at all, or not knowing the prohibitions, the various prohibitions of Shabbos.